morning, church. I'll give you greetings from our partners in ministry through the Pillar Network in Colombia, South America. Kenneth and I enjoyed a good week training some pastors. We have begun a 3-year program there, Pastors Training School, and we're off to a really good start. Some precious men and some churches that we're excited about encouraging and training these next few years. Also, greetings from our team that made it safe there, and they're enjoying a day of worship in Colombia, and then they'll begin their English camp and playing soccer with the kids and sharing the gospel. A few of them have a unique opportunity to go into the university there and do some English training and talk about Christianity. Colombia is a socialist government, and so typically there's resistance, but we've been given access, and it's a beautiful thing. So pray for the team. Access is what I want us to think about this morning. What does it mean to have access? Friday, as I was thinking about coming back, I remembered I had to go online and fill out a form in order to get a number that gives me access to get through security so I can come back to the States. Just a quick thing. And so I got my phone out and I'm name and passport and all this stuff, And I don't know about you, but sometimes if you're trying to do things on your phone and you got these drop down things and you got to click something, and then I'm not as apt as most people, and I kept getting hung up on this one box. Like this, I got everything else with this one box, and I couldn't get the right information in this one box. And then I'd go back and then couldn't do it. And then all of a sudden my phone just went blank, and it said access denied, timed out. I'm like, timed out? What does that mean? I'm here. I'm still here. I got time. Like, what's timed out mean? And then I said, okay, well, I don't know. Let me just, go back and do it and all over again. And I get the one and just stuck in this one place and access denied. And now I'm thinking, well, I have to have this to get through security. I'm supposed to be preaching Sunday, and my access is denied. Really want to see my wife. So I didn't know what to do. And then I just let it go, and then the next morning, actually, as I was going to the airport, I just was able to do it, and I was able to get it, as I had access to get through. Access, we tend not to think about its importance unless you're stuck in a foreign country. But here's my concern. My concern is not that you don't enjoy having access to God, is that you don't appreciate what it necessitated to have that access. My concern is that you take for granted your access to the creator of the universe. You take for granted the fact that you can go to him freely and approach him and speak to him through prayers, that you can worship him as we did today. My concern is that you just take that so lightly when the vast majority of this world has no access to the same God and struggles even knowing what that would mean. Like, how can I have a personal relationship with God? And so today, I want us, as we go to Hebrews 7, I want us to come to a new, maybe a deeper appreciation of what it means to have access to God through Jesus. But I'm going to give you a role or a label for Jesus today that I wanted to stick with you, and that is Preist-King. Preist-King, okay? Let me explain. So to really know who Jesus is, you have to appreciate the 3 offices that Jesus perfectly fulfills. Jesus Christ is our prophet, our priest, and our king. He is all of those, and he fulfills those roles perfectly. It's the only way that you can have access to God is because Jesus fulfilled those perfectly in what we call a new covenant relationship with Christ, right? Jesus is our prophet, he is our priest, and he is our king. And it's the priest and the king today that are going to be essential. We studied back in earlier as we were going through Moses' writings, how Moses said, there's going to be a greater prophet than me that will come, and that was Jesus. Hebrews is about Jesus being priest and king, or Preist-King. And here's what I want for you to understand, that it is because of God's promise, and it is because of Christ's perfection, that we have a priest-king who can do three things. He can fully redeem us, he can completely save us, and he continually allows us access to God, right? Because of who he is, he can fully redeem us. We are saved completely, saved to the uttermost. In completing that work of salvation, he grants us this access to God directly, but it is through him. And we're going to see this in the scripture, and I'm going to introduce you to this most mysterious, intriguing figure in the Bible named Melchizedek, right? So hopefully today you'll never forget this most interesting figure and what he means to all of us. All right, so there's going to be several lessons, and the first is this. As our priest-king, Jesus, he has the ability to grant us access to God forever. Now, it's important for you to realize what it means to have access to God temporarily and have access to God permanently. And we're going to learn today that you have permanent access. It's like when I filled out that form, the same form that got me into the country, it didn't give me access to get out of the country. I had to fill it out again. That's where I got hung up. So it's not just like temporary access. Maybe God will hear me. Maybe God will answer my prayer. Maybe God will spend time. Maybe I can relate to God today, but not tomorrow. No, this is permanent access. And it's because of our priest-king. All right, so now let's chapter 7, verse 1. For this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of God Most High. So that's all in reference to this figure. He met Abraham and blessed him as he returned from defeating the kings. And Abraham gave him 1/10 of everything. Now, what does his name mean? First, his name means King of Righteousness, but his name means something else. His name also means King of Salem, or King of Peace. Now, what about him? Verse 3. Well, he was without father or mother, without genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life. There's going to be lots of places for you to memorize, underline, or take note of today. And so if you're taking notes or if you're underlining, here's the first one. But resembling the Son of God, he remains a priest forever. That's super important. Resembling the Son of God, he remains a priest forever. Okay, now, quick story. Go back to Genesis. And in Genesis 15, we have one of the most important chapters in the whole Bible, because there's this man named Abram, and God meets him. And he says to Abram, okay, through you, I am going to form an entire nation, the whole world. There's going to be a family composed of all the nations, and they're going to be your children. And I am going to save them. I'm going to protect them. I'm going to provide for them. They're going to be mine. And he made this promise to Abraham. The Bible calls that an oath or a covenant. And then the Bible says, and Abram believed, and God declared him to be righteous. So righteousness comes by way of what? Faith. Always by faith, not by works. Abram believed, and God said, okay, now you're righteous like me. And so that was the beginning of the Abrahamic covenant, which we enjoy to this day. But now there's a story that happens just behind them. Here's a story. In Genesis 14. So Abraham was in Canaan, and they were enjoying prosperity. He was with his nephew Lot, but they were growing too big, and they needed to split the animals up. So Lot goes to a place called Sodom, which is a very wealthy place, good land, very productive. Abraham says, okay, I'll just stay in the mountains. And then something happened, because there were all these cities, and every city had a king. So you got all these little kings, and I call them city kings. Well, then there was a group of other kings who became bandits. I call them pirate kings. And there's 5 pirate kings that came together to form a coalition. And the pirate kings start attacking all of these little city kings and conquering them, because they overpower them. And so it's like stealth. They come in, boom, conquer the city kings. The pirate kings take away people as slaves and take away all the wealth, and off they go. Well, they did this to Sodom, and in taking the wealth from Sodom, they also took Lot, Abraham's cousin. And then when Abraham heard about it, he's like, oh no, you don't mess with my cousin. That's my cousin. You don't do that. And so he gets all his men together with swords, and at night they go and they find the pirate kings and they conquer them. They take all of the wealth that they had stolen and all of the people, and then they leave and they start coming back. And then the king of Sodom hears Abraham's just conquered them. He's got your people, he's got your wealth. And the king of Sodom was going to go to meet Abraham, and basically he was just going to say, hey, you know what? Thank you, first of all. Could I have my people back? You can keep the wealth. You deserve that. I just want my people back. All right, so they're waiting for this to happen. And as Abraham and Lot are there with all this wealth, this mysterious figure shows up. And we only see his name recorded 3 times in the whole Bible. Here, and then David's going to say something about him much later, like 1,000 years later, and then we don't hear about him until the author of Hebrews, thousands of years later. Who is this guy? And what's so interesting is the Bible gives him these titles, like this Melchizedek, the high priest of God. And in the Genesis story, what happens is Melchizedek shows up, and he offers Abraham and Lot bread and wine, very symbolic. And then he does something amazing. He blesses Abram. Like he gives a heavenly blessing to Abram. And he basically says, you're blessed by God, Abram, because I just want you to know your Creator cares for you. What a blessing. Your Creator cares for you, and he has provided you victory. And then, super interesting, Melchizedek then blesses God. He blesses Abraham, then he blesses God, and then he's gone, vanishes. Before he goes, Abraham does something that's also fascinating. Abraham takes 1/10 of all the wealth that he had captured, and he just gives it to Melchizedek as a literally a thanksgiving offering. So he tithes from his wealth. He gives it to this mysterious figure, like here, I am thankful to God. I want to show that. He gives him a tithe of all of his wealth. And then we don't hear about him anymore. The king of Sodom shows up and says, hey, great, you won. Can I have my people? Abraham says, you know what? You can have everything. I've already made an oath to God. I've paid my oath with my tithe. Now, good. I'm good to go. You can have the rest. And that's the story. So now, what the author of Hebrews is going to do, it's going to take this figure, Melchizedek, and he's going to make this so important connection between Melchizedek and Jesus, but he has to do this. He has to bypass the Levitical priesthood in order to make the connection. Now, to keep all of that in mind, and I promise you, I'll help you to understand this. All right, so now we see, beginning in chapter 7, this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the God Most High. So he was a priest, but he also was a king, because his name literally means, in Hebrew, Melchizedek is a Hebrew term, king of righteousness. He's the king of righteousness, but he's also the king that rules over an area, but the area is symbolic because Salem comes from shalom, and that means peace or rest. We've already talked about that if you've been with us in our study. So not only is he the king of righteousness, he's the king of God's rest, the king of peace. These two things come together in Melchizedek, which, by the way, In the future, there became literally a city with that name, because in Hebrew, to name something a city is just Yechru or Jeru, as we say in English. So Jerusalem would be the city of peace. What am I talking about? Jerusalem. Sure, Jerusalem. And it would be there at Jerusalem where David would then bring up this interesting figure, Melchizedek, again, there in the city of peace. And in verse 3, there's some super interesting characteristics about Melchizedek. It just makes him so mysterious. We don't know who his father was or his mother, didn't have a genealogy, don't know when he began, when he ends. All we know, and here's what you need to underline, is that he resembles God's own son. And that he's not just a temporary priest, but he's a forever priest. He resembles God's son, and he is a forever priest. Now there's a lot of confusion about who is he exactly, and there's some people who say, well, this is just Jesus before he became Jesus, and he just appeared as Melchizedek. And a lot of people believe that, and they call it a pre-incarnate appearance of the Son of God or something like that. And then there's others who would say, well, he's an angel. Because in the Old Testament, there's all kind of angels who appear, angels of the Lord that represent God. And either one of those could absolutely be true. I tend to think it was actually a guy, a person, and because of the mysterious nature of who he was, he symbolizes something greater. Because of verse 3, where it says, he resembles the Son of God. And so I think that because of this, he creates this special category of priest-king that we don't see of anyone else in the Bible. So Melchizedek is a type of something that will be revealed in the future. He resembles the reality of Melchizedek, and the reality is Jesus Christ. Hang with me, I'll show you. Now, verse 4. In verse 4, basically, the author of Hebrews is going to say, now, it's really important you understand that as great as Abraham was, and Abraham was great, like he is our father, the covenant promise came through him, Abraham met someone greater. Right, this is what he says. Now consider how great this man Melchizedek was. Even Abraham the patriarch, this is the father Abraham, he recognized this guy is greater than me, and he gave him a tenth of all of his plunder to him. In doing so, then the author of Hebrews says, now that's going to set Melchizedek apart from all the Levitical priests. Think about the Old Testament. The sons of Levi who receive the priestly office have a command according to the law to collect a tenth from the people, that is from their brothers and sisters, though they have also descended from Abraham. But one without this lineage collected a tenth from Abraham and blessed the one who had the promise. So, law of Moses. And in the law of Moses, you got all the Israelites, and part of the law is pay taxes. And so you pay all kinds of taxes to support the economy of Israel, right? It's a unique economy for a nation of Israel. But one of the things that you did is you paid a tenth of your wealth to the Levitical priests, because they worked to serve the people by offering the sacrifices and caring for the tabernacle or the temple, so they weren't able to inherit wealth on their own. And so the tithe, or the tenth of the wealth from the individuals, went to the service of the Levitical priests. And then even the Levitical priests, they gave a tenth of their tenth that they received for the service of the other priests. So everybody's paying a tithe, or everyone's paying a tenth of their wealth to maintain the function of the nation of Israel. And the author of Hebrews says it's just how the family operated, brothers and sisters. It's how the family of Israel, because they were all related, it's just how they operated, right? So it's a very easy analogy to say, kind of, we do the same thing because we all give of our wealth in order for this church family to operate, right? And the church family can't operate unless we simply do that. And so, we practice something similar. But when it came to Melchizedek, Abraham gave someone he didn't even know. He just recognized, you are far greater, and so I'm going to give to the person that is greater than me. All right, so that's going to be one of the clear distinctions. And which, by the way, again, we are not under the law as New Testament Christians or as New Covenant Christians. So all of the taxation of Israel isn't incumbent upon us. But many of us, and I'm one of those people, who I love following the stewardship principle of Abraham here, and I freely give a tenth. That's the beginning place of my giving. I give a tenth of my wealth because I recognize everything comes from God, and as an act of thanksgiving, I just give it back to him. And I do it to my family, the local church. And I just highly encourage that. If that's something you have in practice, it's beautiful. And by the way, God has never, ever, ever failed to bless me and my family for my faithfulness in giving. I think that's just how God works. So, but it's always like Abraham. I give it freely. No one's going to twist my arm. I did it this past week. I received my pay from the church. I went on the Realm app and I was like, God, I want to worship you in this moment. I'm going to give. I'm so grateful. I thank you. Thank you for my church. Help us to fulfill our mission, and click, and off we go. So Abraham provides us a wonderful example, but here's the thing. Abraham recognized that this person, Melchizedek, was superior, because in verse 7, it says, without a doubt, the inferior, that's Abraham, is blessed by the superior, which is Melchizedek. And this should boggle the mind of a Jewish person. Like, who could be greater than Abraham? Like, he's the beginning of everything. He is the one who received the blessing. He's the one who received the promise. Well, it's very clear in the scriptures that Abraham found his superior, and he worshiped him, and he received a blessing from him. So in the one case, verse 8, men who will die receive a tenth. That's talking about the Levitical priests. The Levitical priesthood from Aaron and his sons downward. But in the other case, Scripture testifies that he, Melchizedek, continues to live. And even in a sense, Levi himself, who receives a tenth, has paid a tenth through Abraham, for he was still within his ancestor when Melchizedek met him. All right, so the author of Hebrews is saying, okay, now I need to create these categories. And let's take Aaron, the high priest, and all of the Levitical priests who would serve the nation of Israel, and they did it for centuries. They are the inferior because they live and die. And then when they die, someone has to replace them, right? They serve the nation, and then they're done, and then they're replaced. So they're pretty temporary, and they're pretty inferior, and that's just same. The analogy applies. That's exactly me. I'm going to die one day, and then you got to replace me, and then just things go on. That's just how it works. But Melchizedek is different. He doesn't die. He doesn't die. He still remains forever. And so obviously there's something unique about him. And by the way, the author of Hebrews says, so Abraham, he says, you're greater. I'm going to provide an offering to you of thanksgiving because of who you are. So when Abraham tithed the tenth of his wealth to Melchizedek, everybody who belongs to Abraham did it at the same time. Because in the Bible, there's this really important understanding. Now, the technical term is federal headship, but all it means is this. When someone in sort of an ultimate position of authority does something, everyone from his lineage does it at the same time. So there's like 3 examples of this pretty clearly. One is Adam. And when Adam sinned, what happened? You sinned. Like literally, when Adam sinned, you sinned because you were in him, because you came from him. So when Adam sinned, you sinned. And then you were in Adam. Now, that's the bad news. But the good news is when Christ died to redeem sinners, when Christ died, if you've placed saving faith in Jesus, you died as well. Therefore, your sins have been paid for because Christ is our head, right? Now we have Abram who functions this way. And when Abram then makes his offering to Melchizedek, everybody who's in Abram does it as well. I mean, his great-grandson was Levi, and so Abram pays the tithe, so does Levi, because he's in him. And therefore, all the Levitical priests, in essence, are subservient in submission to the great high priest of God, Melchizedek. So obviously the inferior then blessed by the superior. Now, what happens? Well, see, because of this, there's a high priest who's never going to die. So if it's absolutely necessary to go to God through a priest, which it is, you cannot have access to God unless you go through the high priest. How unfortunate is it if you keep trying to get access to God by these priests who keep dying, who are inferior? Why not go to God through a priest that never dies? Now, verse 11. Here's just simple logic. If perfection came through the Levitical priesthood, for on the basis of it the people received the law, what further need was there for another priest to appear? As said, according to the order of Melchizedek, and not according to the order of Aaron. All right, so basically, is it like if Aaron would have been perfect, and if Aaron would have been eternal, and if Aaron's sons would have done their jobs rightly, we wouldn't need Melchizedek. No, just here's the law, here's the priest, good, you got access to God forever. But what's the problem? Aaron died, he failed, his sons failed miserably. The story of the Levitical priesthood is like these guys made a mockery of worship and making offerings and sacrifices to God. So that cannot be the way to go about it. Now, if he would have done things perfectly, and if Aaron would have been everlasting, great. We don't need Melchizedek. But because he didn't, and because the old covenant failed, we got to get something better. We have to have something better. And what's fascinating to me is that David knew this. David knew this. David recognized, man, this Levitical priesthood, it's not cutting it. Because in one of his songs, he said, God's going to send a better priest. Psalm 110. That's what Casey read for us. God's going to send a better priest. This is 1,000 years after Abraham and 1,000 years before Jesus. Right in the middle, David goes, yeah, something better's got to come. This priesthood thing, it ain't working for us. Verse 12. For when there's a change in the priesthood, there must be a change of law as well. If there's the law that Aaron and his sons failed to accomplish, we need a better priest. We need a better law, a law that's going to stick. Keep that in mind. For the one of these things are spoken about belonging to a different tribe. No one from it has served at the altar. Now it is evident that our Lord, talking about Jesus, came from the tribe of Judah, and Moses said nothing about that tribe concerning priests. So now, if you have any Jewish friends, you go to them and you say, I believe Jesus is the high priest. Jesus, the Jew, I believe he's my high priest. They're going to be like, you're an idiot. He came from the wrong tribe. You can't be a high priest unless you're a Levite. You're like, no, there's a different tribe that also has priests. It's the royal one. It's the kingly one. They're like, no, you're crazy. I said, well, have you read David? Have you seen Abraham? And then we show them, right? Because, coming from the Levitical tribe, that was a failure. So actually, we need someone who's going to do an end around, not from the tribe of Levi. What about the royal tribe? What about the tribe of Judah? The tribe that produces kings and priests. Moses didn't understand that. Abraham would have, because he met Melchizedek. Somehow David did. And what was happening when David wrote Psalm 110 is that the Spirit of God was helping him to understand that God was making an oath. God was making a promise that through him and through his tribe, a priest king would come and he would serve God's people forever. All right, verse 15. So we need an everlasting and eternal high priest who comes from God, right? Not from the tribe of Levi. And this becomes clearer if another priest like Melchizedek appears, who did not become a priest based on a legal regulation about physical descent. Because basically, like, if you wanted to be a Levitical priest, you had to be from the tribe of Levi, and then you're just a Levitical priest because you're a Levite. And even if you didn't want to be a priest, too bad you're a priest. It's sort of like I run into this on occasion where like I'll meet somebody and I'll say, you called to ministry. I'm called to ministry. Why? Well, my grandfather was a preacher. I'm like, okay, that's great, but why are you called to ministry because of your grandfather? Well, just the thought was that my grandfather's a preacher, dad's a preacher, I'm going to be a preacher. Like, maybe, but maybe not, right? And that's what the author of Hebrews is saying here. That on the one hand, sure, you're Levites, that's how it all works. But what if someone came differently, right? So if another priest like Melchizedek appears, not just based on the law, the legal regulations, but what if this priest came based on, here's another place where you need to underline, the power of an indestructible life. What does that mean? Well, all the other priests lived and died, and they sinned and they failed. So obviously they cannot provide you forever access to God. The only person that can provide you access to God forever is a priest who is forever. He has to have an indestructible life. Now, why does Jesus have an indestructible life? Because he came from heaven, he's divine, and because of the resurrection. He dies, but he doesn't stay dead. Now, he resurrects from the death, showing I am indestructible. Amen? That's our Melchizedek. He is our forever priest. He has the power of an indestructible life. Now, this is why, verse 17, David says about the Messiah, he didn't know his name would be Jesus, but he knew something greater was coming. And he says, he's writing this down under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. You are a priest forever. I mean, David would have known now hundreds and hundreds of years of priests. And he'd probably been like, yeah, often they fail us. But he's like, no, there's going to be someone better. You are a priest forever, not according to the order of Levi or Aaron, but according to the order of Melchizedek, the priest king, the king of righteousness, the king of peace. Someone's coming, and David knew that. And so now this verse from Psalm 110 becomes an oath because God declares it. It's in the scriptures. It becomes a promise. Now all we need to do is figure out who God was talking about. And now it's imperative for you to appreciate the fact that the author of Hebrews is going to reveal to us that the one, according to the order of Melchizedek, is Jesus Christ, which, by the way, in his earthly ministry, in Matthew 22, Jesus quotes Psalm 110 and says, that's me. So there's no doubt here. Jesus says, when David said the great priest king was coming, that's me. And he declares himself because of that. Now, verse 18. This is where it's going to get good. So are you with me so far? Okay, good. It's about to get good here. So the previous command, that's the Old Covenant. The entire Old Testament. And how the Levitical priesthood failed to give the people access to God. I remember that. They failed. So the previous command is annulled. It's done away with. Why? Well, it was weak. All the priests kept dying. It was unprofitable because the priests weren't perfect. They were sinners. And they were trying to give access to God with other sinful people. It just didn't work. But a better hope is introduced through which, here's the next place to underline, we draw near to God. There's access for you. There's access for you. There's forever access to God that you can have, but only through this person who comes in the order of Melchizedek. None of this happened without an oath. God has to confirm this by a promise, and he does in Psalm 110. For others became priests without an oath, like Levi, you're just born a Levite. God's never like making a promise to you and you and you and you, you'll be a priest forever. He doesn't say it to any of the priests, not even Aaron. But with this one individual, you only need one forever priest. With this one, God made a promise. God made an oath. He said, you're my forever priest. You are the one who will give forever access to God. Others came without an oath, verse 20, but he became a priest with an oath by the one who said to him, quoting 1 Samuel 15, when God makes a promise, he doesn't change his mind. That's really good news, by the way. When God promises you something, he doesn't change his mind. And what's the promise? It's right there again. You're a priest forever. This one will be the only priest you ever need. If you want access to God, all you're going to need is this priest. And in verse 22, now, 22 verses later, the author of Hebrews reveals who Melchizedek is. Because of this oath, what's the word? What is it? Jesus. Jesus. He has also become the guarantee of a better covenant. A better covenant. The first covenant failed because the Levitical priesthood failed. The Israelites failed. They could not keep or maintain redemption. They failed. And so a better high priest had to come, doing the end around through the tribe of Judah, a forever priest king whom we know as Jesus, and he becomes the guarantee of a forever covenant. One that cannot fail. And if you have placed saving faith in Christ, you're a part of this better covenant. And now we have to say that Aubrey's in the covenant. Because I heard what she said. I watched her obedience. And now she's in. And she has a forever high priest now in Jesus Christ. He'll never fail you, Aubrey. So, notice the word guarantee. Notice that word. Basically, what happens is Jesus becomes the co-signer of your salvation guarantee, your contract with God. You're saved forever, saved completely. Jesus co-signs that, right? Have you ever had to co-sign something? Raise your hand. Isn't it a scary moment? Like for all my kids, when they bought homes, Dad had to show up. All these stack of papers. I just cared about the one that had the number on it. Okay, sir, I need you to co-sign. I'm like, Tell my children, you know what this means. This means if you don't pay this, I have to pay that. Which means I will kill you. Because if I have to pay it anyway, I'm just going to kill you. And I co-sign. Now all of the responsibility is on me. he co-signs. Isn't it great? He co-signs the guarantee, your guarantee that you will always have access to God. That's why we have a better covenant, because it is bound up with the guarantee of Jesus Christ. And now we all get to approach God through faith. Now sinners seeking forgiveness can find it. Now doubters looking for answers can find them. Now people gripped with fear don't have to be gripped anymore. All of your sin washed away. And you can have right standing with God forever because he is the guarantee. Now, the next 3 verses, these are my favorite. Many have become Levitical priests. They come and go. Pastors, we come and go. They are prevented by death from remaining in office. But now, not Jesus. Not our Preist-King. Because he remains forever. He holds his priesthood permanently. Here's the verse. Therefore, he is able to save, what's the word? Completely. Forever. Man, underline that. He is able to save. We talked about this last week. There's absolutely no way, if Jesus guarantees your salvation, that you would ever lose your salvation. You will be saved completely. For those who come to God, what is it? Through Jesus. That's it. It is through Jesus that you have access to God. Since Jesus is always, always, always living to intercede for them. That means that in this moment, Jesus is interceding on your behalf to God. If you have gone through Jesus and placed your faith in him and in him alone for salvation, in this moment, he is interceding for you. And he promises to do that forever. It is because of his eternal nature. It is because of his perfect life. It's because of his atoning sacrifice on the cross. It's because of his glorious resurrection, proving power over Satan and sin and death. It's because of his ascension back to heaven where he, as Psalm 110 says, he is seated at the right hand of God. It is because Jesus in this moment is extending his power towards this earth. Through the ministry of angels, through the power of his word, through the witness of his people, through the church. It is Jesus who sends the Holy Spirit into the hearts of every believer to confirm the promise is true. It is this Jesus who will take those who are weak sinners and turn them into spiritual champions. And he's always at work for you. Always. Right this moment, he is working for you. He is your Preist-King. And you have direct access to God because of Jesus Christ. Now, just the summary. For this is the kind of high priest that we need. Not Aaron, not any of his sons. This is what you need. You need a Preist-King who is holy, innocent, undefiled, separated from sinners, exalted above the heavens. And not like the old Levitical priests. I mean, every day, go to the tabernacle, go to the temple. Every day, here come the worshipers, bring in their animals, kill the animals, throw their blood on the altar, sacrifice the animals. And all that did is cover their sins until the next time they sinned. And here they come again. More animals, more blood, more covering until the next time they sinned. Rivers and rivers of blood every week of every year for centuries. This king priest, He doesn't need to offer sacrifices every day as the other high priests like Aaron did. No, first for their own sins and then for the sins of the people. No, this great high priest, this Preist-King, he did this once for all time when he offered himself. Aaron never offered his own blood. It couldn't redeem you if he did. But when Jesus offered his blood, our forever Preist-King made a once and forever sacrifice that guarantees now this new covenant relationship that will never, ever fail. Because Jesus is everlasting, so then his sacrifice is everlasting. For the law appoints high priests, men who are weak. But the promise of the oath that Melchizedek will come and he will be a priest forever, that's the promise, that's the oath, which came after the law. This promise has appointed not a man, but what? But a divine Son. And he has been perfected forever. He went through the most holy place, offering himself and his blood as a forever sacrifice. And now he reigns, our great Preist-King reigns, making intercession for us. And my friends, let me tell you something. He's fighting the battle for us, even now. Even now. Now, I'm going to invite you these next few weeks to pray for your church. And this happens on occasion where we ask you to do this because we've been blessed seeing people saved and baptized, our church is growing, and Satan is alarmed. And we are facing some pretty serious spiritual attack. There's some of your brothers and sisters who are really struggling right now. And they are facing the onslaught of someone who's quite powerful. And just this past week, the elders decided we're increasing our prayer for our church family. We are praying against Satan. And we are praying against Satan through our Preist-King, the one whom his heel is on Satan's head, the one who will win the spiritual battle. But pray for that. Would you help us? Would you commit to that? Because there's some people who are struggling right now. And if it were not for Christ, our Preist-King, I wouldn't know what to offer these people. But because of Christ, because of who he is and what he's accomplished, I know that we will have forever access to our great God, through his power and through his strength. Pray with me. Father, we pray in the name and because of the shed blood of Jesus Christ. And we confidently, not because of our own strength, but because of our Preist-King Jesus, we rebuke Satan in our church. We demand that he flees, because we are a part of a better covenant that has been guaranteed by the blood of our righteous King. And now, Father, we come humbly but confidently to your throne of grace through Jesus, our forever priest. And we thank you. We thank you that now, having a priest forever, that we can always have access to you. And forgive us for not appreciating that. And forgive us for not coming to you in prayer and in worship more. But we're so grateful that we can do it at any time, at any place, because of our Savior, Jesus Christ. Now bless this church, Father, I pray. In Jesus' name, amen.